Electricity is something that we use in our everyday life on a regular basis. But rather than using it to charge our electronic devices, electric-type Pokemon have discovered so many other uses for the shocks and zaps they produce. From using it as a way of communication to actually destroying wide areas of land, there are electric-type Pokemon of all shapes, sizes, and dispositions. But which of these Pokemon's actions far outshine their electric type, and which ones would give a nasty shock at best, or a deadly electrocution at worst? I'm Kyle with Pokebinge, and these are electric-type Pokemon, good to evil. As usual, let's start with the rules. We'll be judging these Pokemon by the characteristics of the species as a whole, meaning we won't be looking at any individual instances of the Pokemon in question. An exception can be made for some legendary Pokemon, but this will mostly be on a case-by-case basis. Also, if an entire Pokemon evolutionary line shares the electric typing, they'll be sharing one spot. As usual, we'll be starting with our most noble electric Pokemon, and working our way down to the most evil. This first category is made up of Pokemon whose actions far outshine the light their electric typing gives off. These electric Pokemon are the good. The Pokemon that takes our gold medal of good has a glowing reputation, quite literally, because the light Pokemon, the Ampharos line, is claiming our top spot. In the Pokemon universe, whatever clothes you wear has a pretty good chance of being made from the wool that comes from either Mareep or Flaaffy, the first two Pokemon in this line. If you were to try to touch the wool while it is still attached to either Mareep or Flaaffy though, there's a chance you'll get a mild shock due to the built-up electricity in their fur. But really, that is the worst thing that can be said about either Pokemon, as Mareep and Flaaffy are both mild-mannered. But it's Ampharos that earns the Pokemon the top spot in this ranking. Thanks to the light that Ampharos emits from the tip of their tails, they'll help those who are lost and guide them back to safety. And much like Mareep and Flaaffy, Ampharos has a pretty calm attitude, leading to all three Pokemon in this line to be highly popular in whatever region they live in. Thanks to their calm demeanors, and that Ampharos will help out anyone they can, it's not really a surprise that they earn the gold medal of good. Moving on to our silver medal of good winners, Plusle and Minun are both known as the cheering Pokemon. They may not be the most powerful Pokemon out there, but as the saying goes, what they lack in strength, Plusle and Minun more than make up for when it comes to spirit and enthusiasm. Regardless of who's battling, Plusle and Minun will root for their friends and do their best to help their morale. If Plusle or Minun do get a bit too carried away with their cheering though, they can accidentally release so much electricity that they short out their bodies. This behavior is more often than not a way that Plusle and Minun show extreme happiness though, and the released electricity often makes crackling sounds to further express the joys that they feel. They aren't by any means great fighters, but for all the support and care they show to their fellow Pokemon, they definitely earn the silver medal of good. Next, a storm is coming, as Raikou takes the bronze medal of good. Unlike some of the legendaries that appear with the more familiar characters in the shows or movies, Raikou is kind of unique since the Thunder Pokemon's main appearance is in the special Legend of Thunder. In the show, Raikou does have some behavior issues, but what brings it this high up is the fact that this legendary shows no fear and is extremely brave when it comes to saving other electric-type Pokemon from Team Rocket. And the hero of the special helps Raikou escape from Team Rocket, so the Thunder Pokemon has a change of heart and shows appreciation and even prevents other Pokemon from attacking the main character afterwards. Its Pokedex entries basically just mention that when Raikou runs, the sound of their battle cries sound like thunder, hence its Pokedex title. But for the brave actions that Raikou performed in the special, we feel confident in awarding the Thunder Pokemon the Bronze Medal of Good. Next, we have one of the most iconic Pokemon evolutionary lines in the entire franchise, which of course is the Mouse Pokemon, the Pikachu and Raichu line. Like we said, this Pokemon line is probably what comes to people's minds the most when asked about which Pokemon is the most well-known. Well, Pikachu at least. Pichu, the first Pokemon in this evolutionary line, does work pretty well with other Pichu, as they use the electricity they produce to play with one another, and even though they can electrocute themselves on occasion, thankfully the zaps and sparks aren't strong enough to cause any real damage. With Raichu, their attitude takes on a much more serious turn, as most of their Pokedex entries mentions how powerful their electric powers are, with some saying that Raichu could knock out a Pokemon as large as Copperajah with ease. But the Raichu of Alola have a much more lighthearted attitude, with them using their tails as makeshift surfboards, and while it is unclear how Raichu gained this form, a belief is because of them eating pancakes from an Alolan recipe. But if we're being honest, it is Pikachu that raises this evolutionary line so high in our morality ranking. As if they're given a hat to wear, they'll bond with their trainer on an incredibly deep level, and even without headwear, Pikachu work incredibly well within their own groups. We do wish we had more to say as far as Pichu and Raichu are concerned, but seeing as how well this Pokemon line cares about each other, and how they bond with their trainers, it makes sense that they earn such a high ranking in our good area. Taking a swipe to claim our next spot, we have the Thunderclap Pokemon, Zeraora. If we were to just look at Zeraora's Pokedex entries alone, we would be placing the Thunderclap Pokemon much lower on the list. Because honestly, most of the Pokedex entries mention this legendary slashing at others with electrified claws. Luckily, we're going to take a look at the movie The Power of Us. In the film, Zeraora saved several other Pokemon in the past from a fire, and deeply cares for them. However, due to humans' mistreatment of the environment, it's pretty resentful to them for the most part. The exception being the mayor of Fula City, as Zeraora saves her from a rock slide but is badly hurt in the process. Though this is kind of a silver lining, as the mayor's daughter helps the Thunderclap Pokemon heal and forms a pretty solid friendship with the legendary. Later on in the movie, Zeraora doesn't hesitate to save more Pokemon during another wildfire, and gains respect for the heroes of the movie after Ash jumps in to protect his other Pokemon from an attack. While Zeraora does seem to prefer a reclusive lifestyle for the most part in the film, we feel that the Thunderclap Pokemon's actions are more than enough reason to place it this high in our ranking. Boogieing into our next entry, we have the dancing Pokemon, Pom-Pom Style Oricorio. Undoubtedly the most cheerful out of all the Oricorios, Pom-Pom Style Oricorio looks like they might take a role similar to Plusle and Minun, where they'd love nothing more than to cheer on others. And while Pom-Pom Style Oricorio is a very popular Pokemon wherever they live, and will use their dancing to cheer others up, they can also be a bit sneaky. There are a couple of Pokedex entries of Pom-Pom Style Oricorio, using their dancing moves to lower their enemy's guard before delivering electrified smacks with their pom-poms. Sure, it may not be the greatest battling style, but for how much they cheer up those around them, and the fact that Pom-Pom Style Oricorio only seems to use their electrified pom-poms against others when they battle, we're placing them here. Our next legendary, the Deep Black Pokemon, Zekrom, will do anything to help someone create a more ideal world, and for the most part, that is an incredible quality to have. But Zekrom does have a couple of things that count against it. In the movie Black, Victini and Reshiram, Zekrom does become an ally to the villain of the movie, but as far as Pokemon villains go, Zekrom isn't that bad. Sure, it does clash with the heroes on occasion, but after realizing the actions of the villain of the movie release the corrupted Dragon Force that threatens the world, Zekrom does work with Reshiram to blast away the Force and become an ally to the heroes. And while a lot of Zekrom's Pokedex entries mention that the Deep Black Pokemon will help create an ideal world, the entry from S.H.I.E.L.D. mentions that Zekrom will wipe out entire kingdoms if people lose the righteousness in their hearts. So it does want to do the right thing, and is a pretty decent legendary, but its willingness to go to such an extreme definitely drops its ranking quite a bit. Moving on to the electric squirrel, Pachirisu. These little guys, as they are squirrels, are found living wherever there are a lot of trees, where they take advantage of the holes in the wood to make their home. Pachirisu, even though they don't evolve, get along very well with each other, as they'll rub the cheeks on their face with one another in order to share their electricity. But while Pachirisu is related to the Pikachu family, we don't have nearly as much information on the electric squirrel Pokemon, but seeing as they do care about each other and are willing to help each other out, they're definitely a good Pokemon at heart. Gazing at this evolutionary line, we have the Gleameye Pokemon, the Luxray line. Like some other previous Pokemon in the ranking so far, the Luxray line is an extremely tight group. Shinx, the first Pokemon in this line, may not be as strong as Luxio or Luxray. However, they are known to look out for each other very well, using their tails to send signals to each other and have the ability to make their fur shine whenever they're in danger, which can also be used as an emergency alert at times. With Luxio, they don't seem to be really that bothered in alerting others to potential danger. However, there are multiple Pokédex entries mentioning that Luxio lives among others of their kind and get along very well, even sharing their food with one another. Luckily for both Shinx and Luxio, with Luxray often serving as the head of the group of the pack, this Pokemon has the ability to see through anything. What makes this useful ability really handy is the fact that Luxray is able to find any missing Pokemon if they're separated from the pack, as well as helping them find food fairly easy. Next we have the Generator Pokemon, the Heliolisk line. Even though Helioptile and Heliolisk live in an environment where they may not encounter a whole lot of other Pokemon or people, both Pokemon in this line are pretty popular. The reason being is that due to them being able to absorb sunlight and convert it into energy, they can power entire cities with their power alone. And while we don't have too much else to go off of, we are placing the Generator Pokemon in the good section, due to them helping supply electricity to others, which really helps out a lot of people. Fetching our next spot, we have the Dog Pokemon line, the Boltund line. In the Galar region, Yamper and Boltund are Pokemon who are highly popular due to their cheerful disposition and the fact that they're willing to help out when needed. With Yamper, this Corgi lookalike has the ability Ball Fetch and will bring back any Pokeball their trainer tosses during battle. However, Yamper only does this due to them constantly wanting treats for their help. Where Boltund is concerned, it doesn't seem like they help out as much, with both of their Pokédex entries just mentioning that they're incredibly fast and not much else. But we're placing them in the good section because of Yamper's willingness to help out, and that both Pokemon seem to get along with others really well. Hopefully your electric bill isn't too high, but if it seems like you're paying more than you should, it could be due to our next entrant, the antenna Pokemon, Dedenne. This little rascal may not be able to produce the most powerful electricity, but thanks to their extension cord-like tail, Dedenne will break into homes in order to use electrical outlets to charge their bodies. And yes, seeing a small Pokemon that needs regular charging to even function is cute, but also a bit sad. Dedenne is still breaking into people's homes for their own benefit. And if that was all that we knew about Dedenne, the antenna Pokemon might be placed lower in our ranking, but we're placing it towards the bottom of our good section, because of the fact that Dedenne cares about others. It will share the electricity in its body with fellow Dedenne, along with whatever food they have. Hopping in to take our next spot, we have the Elefrog Pokemon, the Bellabolt line. Despite looking like Tadbulb and Bellabolt would be more at home in the water, these Pokemon are often found either floating in the air or on riverbanks around the Paldea region. Thanks to the lights that shine out of their heads, if Tadbulb senses any danger around them, they will flash their lights on and off in order to alert those around them to danger. If Tadbulb is exposed to a thunderstorm, they evolve into Bellabolt. But while this Pokemon has a permanently cheerful expression, Bellabolt doesn't really have any stars to their name. Actually, what appears to Bellabolt's eyes are electric sacs that their belly button charges up, which is kinda creepy when you think about it. But nonetheless, they deserve a spot at the bottom of our good section. Our next legendary actually belongs to a group that helps protect the Alola region, the land spirit Pokemon, Tapu Koko. Like with the other guardian deities of Alola, Tapu Koko is held in high regard by the people of this region, and it does indeed do its part to keep the island that the land spirit Pokemon calls home safe. Unlike some other earlier entries though, Tapu Koko is not always the most proactive in helping out, with the legendary merely observing others from time to time just out of curiosity, during times of hardship. But what does give Tapu Koko some good points is how the legendary appears in the Sun and Moon arc of the Pokemon anime. In the show, Tapu Koko does maintain the curious attitude from the games, but the land spirit Pokemon also helps out Ash quite a bit in some cases, such as giving him a Z-Ring, along with the Electrum Z for his Pikachu. Sure, Tapu Koko could and should do more when it comes to helping the folks of Alola from time to time, but for the help that this legendary does do, we'll go ahead and keep them in the good section. Flying high to take our next spot, we have one of the first legendaries in the entire series, the electric Pokemon, Zapdos. If you're around an area that is dealing with a thunderstorm, there's a chance that Zapdos will appear, as this Pokemon prefers to live in them. And in the movie, The Power of One, Zapdos does cause some pretty serious damage, nearly destroying the world due to fighting with both Moltres and Articuno. But we're only giving Zapdos a bit of a break because while this legendary was pretty aggressive, the damage that Zapdos was doing wasn't entirely its fault, as the main villain targets all three legendary birds. But what really saves Zapdos Zapdos from falling any lower into the gray area? Is the episode Clear as Crystal, where Zapdos prevented a crystal used to heal injured electric Pokemon from being stolen? Sure, Zapdos does cause some trouble, but it was pretty much reacting to a bad situation, and it does look out for fellow electric-type Pokemon. For all of the legendaries so far, we've been looking at either the anime or movies, or going by their Pokedex entries. But we're making an exception for the Paradox Pokemon, Miraidon. As this legendary was only introduced in Violet, there isn't all too much to go on. And with Miraidon's Pokedex entry from Violet, it does mention that this legendary did turn the land to ash with its lightning. So why are we placing it at the bottom of our good section? Well, during the game, Miraidon becomes an ally to the player's character and helps out with quite a few things, like being able to turn into a bike in order to help the player access different areas across the Paldea region, and does seem to have a pretty good connection with the player and anyone who seems to have good intentions. But what brings this Pokemon down to the very bottom of our good section is the fact that the Paradox Pokemon doesn't have that much known about them, plus the less than great Pokedex entry from Violet. And with our final good Pokemon taken care of, we now descend down into neutral territory. These electric-type Pokemon fall in the moral gray area, from the Guardian of Alola being close to the bottom of our good section to an Ultra Beast in Alola starting off our gray area. We have the glowing Pokemon, Xurkitree. One glance is enough to tell that Xurkitree is an Ultra Beast that loves electricity, with some appendages that resemble exposed wires and an extension cord. When Xurkitree arrives in Alola, this Ultra Beast is seen around power plants, taking advantage of the plentiful electricity in the area. Unlike some other Ultra Beasts though, Xurkitree isn't the most mobile. The Ultra Beast will stick their limbs into the ground to give Xurkitree the appearance of a regular tree. What does give Xurkitree a tiny bit of good points is the fact that in the anime, it competes with fellow Ultra Beast Blacephalon to put on a pretty spectacular display that the main character gets to witness. But as Xurkitree was doing this more as a way to outdo Blacephalon, and not out of the goodness of its heart, we're ranking the glowing Pokemon here. Sparking up our next entry, we have a member of the legendary Titans, the Electron Pokemon Regieleki. Much like the other legendary Titan Pokemon, how Regieleki came to be is a mystery. Upon closer inspection, it has been discovered that Regieleki is actually made up of clusters of electric energy. Unlike some of the other legendary Titans though, who have appeared in other regions of the Pokemon universe, Regieleki has only called the Galar region home so far. It's a common belief that if the rings of Regieleki's body are removed, this legendary's considerable full power will be unleashed. We really don't know if that would be a good or a bad thing though, but seeing as some of the other legendary Titans were trapped due to their insane power, keeping the rings on Regieleki's body is probably for the best. We're taking a swim to find our next evolutionary line, the light Pokemon, the Lantern line. If you were to look out to the ocean and see lights moving beneath its surface, chances are it's a Chinchou or Lantern swimming around, using the glowing tips of their antenna to help these Pokemon navigate the waters. Rather than just using these lights as a way around the environment, Chinchou actually uses these lights to communicate with one another in a way to help each other out. After it evolves into Lantern, these Pokemon primarily use the light on their antenna as a lure of sorts to attack smaller Pokemon, for Lantern to make a meal of. But while some other Pokemon have more disturbing dining habits, it seems like Lantern just swallows their prey whole. And while this really doesn't have much to do with their behavior, it is said if you see a lot of them underneath the ocean's surface, it looks like a starry sky, which sounds amazing to witness. Our next Pokemon's favorite pastime is playing pranks. The Plasma Pokemon, Rotom. Since their bodies are made up entirely of electric energy, Rotom loves to target any electrical device in order to prank others. Some of Rotom's favorite things to take control of are lawnmowers, washing machines, or fans, which can damage people's gardens, flood their homes, or blow their important documents about respectively. But its love for electric gadgets also does have some beneficial examples as well, such as Rotom taking control of a Pokedex or a phone in some of the games to help out the player's character. Our next duo of Pokemon are literally a blast from the past because they're known as the fossil Pokemon, Dracozolt and Arctozolt. These Pokemon may not be directly connected, but unlike some other prehistoric Pokemon, these ancient Pokemon in the Galar region are revived by finding a mishmash of fossils to be brought back to life. And Dracozolt and Arctozolt default have the link of both being revived with the fossilized bird fossil. But that isn't the only thing that these prehistoric Pokemon have in common. Both of the lower half of their bodies are disproportionately large compared to their extremely tiny upper torsos. Unfortunately, due to them not being able to move particularly well, or able to reach food, they both went extinct. And we don't really have too much to go off of when it comes to morality, hence their placement here in the gray. Our next Pokemon really sticks the landing in the next spot, as it's the sea urchin Pokemon, Pincurchin. Usually found around rocks by bodies of water, Pincurchin will attach themselves to the rocks or boulders in order to scrape whatever moss is growing on them, though they're usually content in just slurping up that delicious moss. They're also pretty timid Pokemon, but if they're approached or even touched by something as innocent as seaweed, they'll discharge quite a bit of electricity. Swooping in to take our next spot, we have the Sky Squirrel Pokemon, Emolga. With their cheerful expressions and the electric sacs on their cheeks, it's clear that Emolga is part of the Pikachu family. But unlike some others in this group, Emolga is a pretty mischievous Pokemon, often stuffing so much food into their cheeks, it's unable to fly properly and tends to use their electricity to zap anyone who gets close to taking away whatever food it has. When Emolga decided to take to the sky and fly, an unfortunate habit they have is releasing electricity that can hit anything or anyone. But as Emolga really isn't doing this to cause harm per se, we aren't counting it too much against it. We're going over to the Paldea region for our next member of the Pikachu family, the hands-on Pokemon, the Pawmot line. Pawmi, the first Pokemon in this Pokemon group, really doesn't seem to be the best fighter, or really have the best control of their electric powers. Pawmi can only generate electricity if they rub the underdeveloped electric sacs on their face, and really don't have any other defensive methods. But once Pawmi evolves into Pawmo, their somewhat helpless nature disappears, mostly due to them gaining the fighting type in addition to their electricity. And thanks to this dual typing, Pawmo fights by electrifying the pads on their paws before firing off devastating shots to their opponents in rapid succession. Pawmot, the final Pokemon in this line, also has the fighting type, but it does take a while to get going in battle, due to their slow movements at first. But after Pawmot gets into the heat of battle, it's said that they'll strike down their enemies with lightning quick movements. You'll definitely want to watch your step when it comes to our next entry, the trap Pokemon, Stunfisk. Often found along seashores and other bodies of land close to water, Stunfisk will burrow themselves into the ground in order to wait to be stepped on before attacking. And if you're thinking that isn't the smartest plan, we agree. But luckily for Stunfisk, this Pokemon is able to be stepped on by someone as heavy as a sumo wrestler and be totally fine. It then proceeds to zap whoever is unfortunate enough to have stepped on them with a bolt of electricity. Our next Pokemon line could really give you a painful bite, so you'll want to watch out for the Stag Beetle Pokemon, the Vikavolt line. Charjabug, thanks to their tough shells that cover a majority of their bodies, are fairly tough Pokemon, as they're able to withstand most attacks with ease. But Charjabug really isn't the fastest Pokemon either, which tends to result in them being stepped on a number of times, with Charjabug usually retaliating with a bolt of electricity. Thanks to their relatively small size, however, Charjabug is a pretty popular Pokemon when it comes to going on camping trips, as their bodies are basically living batteries. After it evolves into Vikavolt, they're a bit more aggressive, as they shoot bolts of electricity at their enemies. Next we have the Kilowattrel line. Wattrel, the first Pokemon in this line, have a pretty unique hunting style, as they're both flyers and swimmers. Wattrel dives into the ocean to catch water Pokemon before using their electricity to shock them before chowing down on their prey. Kilowattrel does lose their swimming skills after they evolve due to them not having any oil in their feathers, but what Kilowattrel lacks in swimming skills, they make up for with their flying skills, with them being able to fly over 430 miles per day. Even though Wattrel and Kilowattrel are newer to the Pokemon universe, we're placing them here because of their very harsh hunting methods. From the Alola region, we have the Roly-Poly Pokemon, Togedemaru. This member of the Pikachu family does have a pretty cheerful expression, but when it comes to Togedemaru, that's pretty much the only good thing we can say about the Roly-Poly Pokemon. When they're battling, they'll leap at their foes with their needle-like fur before stabbing and electrocuting them. And being stuck with what is essentially a living electrified pincushion seems pretty awful. Debatably, some of the fastest electric types in the Pokemon universe. We have the Discharge Pokemon, the Manectric line. Electrike and Manectric love to run, but thanks to their electric typing, they've learned a more intelligent way to run. Both of them use the electricity stored in their bodies to soothe their muscles, allowing them to run further distances, as well as using the power to help them run faster. And while running is no doubt a great exercise, what really counts against against this line is the fact that if they're not careful, sparks fly out of their bodies and start fires. True, they aren't causing the damage intentionally, and we don't know the extent of the fires, but for the harm that both Pokemon can cause, we're placing them at the bottom of our gray area. And with our gray area wrapped up, we now get to the Electric-type Pokemon whose actions alone are enough to make our hair stand out with shock. These Electric-type Pokemon are the bad and the evil. Floating into the top spot of this category, we have the Magnet Zone Pokemon, the Magnezone line. Thanks to the magnetic field that Magnemite, Magneton, and Magnezone put out, all three Pokemon are able to hover around the ground effortlessly and are often mistaken as UFOs. Unfortunately, it's also this magnetic field why we're placing these Pokemon at the start of our bad section. These Pokemon are widely viewed as pests by many, as whatever electronic device they encounter will soon go haywire and become unusable. Some towns actually release an alert signal if too many of these Pokemon gather in town, to help others be prepared. And while none of the Pokemon in the Magnezone line are actively looking to cause harm, given how much of our society uses electricity, and if it goes off, it could lead to some very serious problems. Who's hungry? Because we can guarantee our next entry, the two-sided Pokemon. Morpeko definitely is. If Morpeko has a full belly, this Pokemon has a cheerful disposition and typically gets along pretty well with others. Once the two-sided Pokemon starts getting hungry though, rather than politely asking for something to eat, it does a complete Jekyll and Hyde transformation, becoming extremely angry and violent. According to both Pokedex entries from Sword and Shield, once they're hungry, or hangry if you will, until they get something to eat, it'll get itself into all kinds of trouble. Sure, everyone probably gets a bit hangry now and then, but as Morpeko takes their hunger to the extremes of attacking others and causing trouble, the two-sided Pokemon is being placed in this category. Next we have the Lightning Evolution, Jolteon. The reason for this Pokemon's hair standing on end is due to this evolution storing electricity within their bodies. And out of all the many Pokemon that Eevee evolves into, Jolteon is probably the most temperamental, as there are quite a few Pokedex entries mentioning that they will be high-strung and have mood swings. Unfortunately for Jolteon, there really aren't any mentions of them feeling happy or cheerful during the mood swings, with the Pokedex mentioning that Jolteon will either become angry or sad. When these mood swings happen, Jolteon will use the electricity stored in their bodies to fire their needle-like fur out like tiny missiles, striking anyone around them. Galloping into our next spot, we have the Thunderbolt Pokemon, the Zebstrika line. When we compare Blitzel, the first Pokemon in the line, they're a stark contrast to Zebstrika. With Blitzel, they're mainly a calm Pokemon who uses the electricity flowing through their manes to communicate with one another. Once it evolves into Zebstrika, their calm attitude goes right out the window, as it's described as being very ill-tempered. And while having a grumpy disposition isn't great, what really causes the Zebstrika line to fall this low is the fact that Zebstrika will also fire lightning bolts in all directions when they lose their temper. If you're suffering a power outage, it could be due to the actions of the Thunderbolt Pokemon, the Electivire line. Like some of our previous entries, both Elekid and Electabuzz love getting whatever electricity they can. Unfortunately, Elekid and Electabuzz go about getting their preferred power supply through less than ideal means, like breaking into homes, or where Electabuzz is concerned, breaking into power plants to gobble up whatever electricity they can get. Like with Magnezone, seeing how reliant our society is on electricity, it definitely helps in knocking this Pokemon line down into our bad section. But Electivire's attitude is basically the cherry on top of these Pokemon's problematic sundae. True, once Electabuzz does evolve into Electivire, they seem to stop breaking and entering, but Electivire has two tails, which they'll use to shove into an opponent before letting over 20,000 volts of electricity loose, which usually ends with an extra crispy result. We have our only regional form in this section coming up next, so we're taking a trip back to Alola for the Megaton Pokemon, the Alolan Golem line. Compared to their mainline counterparts, the Geodude, Graveler, and Golem found in the Alola region have pretty grumpy attitudes. While they are often found in mountain areas, if you encounter any of these Pokemon, there is a pretty good chance you'll get an electric shock at the very least. Alolan Geodudes do enjoy burning themselves in the mountainside, and while we can understand them not being happy about being accidentally stepped on, Geodudes slam their body at whoever makes that accident, while also shocking them with electricity. Graveler, as they're not as easy to mistake as just normal rocks, thankfully aren't stepped on quite as much, but they're also known for being fairly quick-tempered. But Alolan Golem is the reason why we're ranking this Pokemon so low. The Golem of Alola have a makeshift cannon on their backs where they will fire boulders charged with electricity at others, and sometimes Alolan Geodude if they aren't careful. Due to this overkill technique and aggressive attitudes, they definitely earn their spot here. Next we have the punk rock Pokemon, the Toxtricity line. Toxel, who is the first Pokemon in this line, might not be the strongest, but they can be extremely bratty as they demand attention from anyone they encounter. And unfortunately, after Toxel evolves into Toxtricity, their behavior takes a further dip regardless if they are in their low-key or amplified forms. When they're in their amplified forms, they're fairly aggressive and short-tempered and have been known to attack others with up to 15,000 volts of electricity. And while they might look more laid back when in their low-key forms, they're still pretty arrogant, picking fights with other Pokemon and looking down on those that they view as weaker than themselves. And if Toxtricity were to become Gigantamaxed, due to their own poison affecting their brain, it will rampage across the land, poisoning the earth anywhere it goes. Natural disasters always suck, but unfortunately, our next entry, the Bolt Strike Pokemon, Thundurus, is basically a living natural disaster. As Thundurus is a fairly ill-tempered Pokemon, this legendary is known for firing off lightning bolts around the Unova region, causing some pretty significant damage. And due to the fact that Thundurus can fly, the Bolt Strike Pokemon has a pretty wide range of damage that they can cause, and even have been known to start forest fires due to that lightning. Thundurus does have a tiny amount of good, as there is one Pokedex entry mentioning that whatever ground Thundurus hits with lightning will become enriched to help new plant life grow. But for the damage that Thundurus causes, in addition to the range of damage this Pokemon can reach, we deserve it earns its spot here in the bad section. Rolling into our next spot with a bang and taking our bronze medal of evil, we have the ball Pokemon, the Electrode line. Voltorb and Electrode are some of the earliest electric types in the Pokemon universe, and pretty much all of the games they've appeared in so far have this to say about this evolutionary line. Be careful around them, as Voltorb and Electrode are essentially living bombs. That is actually really good advice, and unlike other bombs who actually need something to set them off, both Pokemon will sometimes blow up just for the sake of exploding, and really don't seem to care about the damage that they cause. That, coupled with the fact that both have the appearance of Pokeballs, could lead to several people or Pokemon being hurt or even killed if they're within Voltorb or Electrode's blast radius. We have a pair of creepy crawly Pokemon that are taking home the silver medal of evil, the electric spider Pokemon, the Galvantula line. If you have arachnophobia, these Pokemon are basically the stuff of nightmares. And even if you aren't afraid of spiders, the Galvantula line's actions are enough to make our hair stand up with shock. Unlike some other evolutionary lines in this list, where some Pokemon are fairly decent, that's just not the case with Joltik and Galvantula. Joltik is more of a pest than anything else, thankfully, as they're so small. They'll latch themselves on larger electric Pokemon and suck up the energy that the other Pokemon has, which can leave them in a weakened state. However, where Galvantula is concerned, they become much worse. As they are much larger than Joltik, Galvantula can't latch themselves on other Pokemon and remain undetected. Instead, it uses the electric webs they can create to trap others, paralyzing them before munching down on them at their leisure. Horrifying stuff. And if that wasn't bad enough, one of Galvantula's Pokedex entries mentions them raiding the nests of bird Pokemon and eating their defenseless chicks. But real quick before we get to our next entries, if you're enjoying this video and you want to do us a huge favor, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. We ask because we'd really appreciate the help in getting to our next milestone, and we have a ton more content in the works that we can't wait to share with you. And finally, swimming up to take our gold medal of evil, we have the electric fish Pokemon, the Eelektross line. While Tynamo, who is the first Pokemon in this line, really doesn't have anything good or bad going for them, with most of their Pokedex entries just mentioning that they're pretty weak. The same cannot be said for the next two Pokemon in this evolutionary line. Thanks to their long body, after Tynamo evolves into Electric, they'll wrap themselves around others, squeezing tightly before electrocuting them before making a meal of their victim. And if you thought that was bad, Eelektross takes this to a whole new level. As they often live in bodies of water, they'll leap out before clamping their mouths on whoever is their unfortunate target before Eelektross drags them back into the water, all while electrocuting them. And as water conducts electricity, that can be pretty brutal. So in our opinion, the Eelektross line absolutely deserves the gold medal of evil. And with our morality spectrum complete, let's wrap things up by awarding our sinner medals. Getting hungry is something everyone experiences on a regular basis, but we have to give the Gluttony Award to Morpeko, Because of how much of a force to be reckoned with it gets whenever it's hangry. We give the Sloth medal to the Ultra Beast, Xurkitree. If you stand still long enough for others to mistake you as just a tree, you definitely get this award. Taking the Darwin medal with a bang, we have the Electrode line. Sure, Voltorb and Electrode are essentially living bombs, but we also think they should give more thought into their attacking method, as it usually ends with them fainting as well. Our Wrath medal has to go to Thundurus, as they're known for causing destruction wherever they go. Flying away with our Greed medal, or at least trying to, we have Emolga. Due to this mischievous Pokemon's habit of stuffing their faces with so much food, they're unable to fly properly. And finally, taking our Pride medal, we have Tapu Koko, as it seems like they get a lot of enjoyment in being worshipped. And that's every electric-type Pokemon from good to evil. Let us know in the comment section what you think the most evil electric-type Pokemon is. And make sure to hit that notification bell so you can binge our other Pokemon videos. And tell us what typing video we should cover next. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.